All right. Good evening and welcome to the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. We're super excited to have Devin Rich join us. And he's just a member of the community who came to one of our meetings in the past and decided, hey, I got this thing and I can talk about that. And we said, this is perfect. This is a great topic for you to talk about. And simply, this is encouraging him to now present. And we're super excited to have him join us. And, Devin, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Phil?
I'm doing well. You mentioned this is your first, presentation like this. I think you're going to do a great job, and so take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. The last time I did a presentation, that was before COVID, and my local PowerShell group, had about 8 people or so show up. So it was a little bit different audience compared to the 40 plus people that are here. Let's see here. Only thing that I would add is definitely that this is an interactive presentation. So I'm not expecting you to hold all your questions to the end. If you have something, please speak up, break in, raise your hand in chat, send something in chat. Phil will yell at me and get me to stop for a minute if I'm just going on and on. But I'm happy to answer questions as we go. It won't break my train of thought too much, I don't think. A little bit about me. I'm a regular systems administrator. I don't think I'm the smartest person here. So if you were thinking, wow, Devin, you look like you're not very smart, that's fine. You're probably smarter than me. No problem. I would even include, if you have suggestions or you have thoughts about what I present of how it could be improved, I think that's a valuable discussion to bring up here in a user group like this and say, have you considered doing it this way? Or, this seems like another way that you could have done the same thing that would be cleaner, or whatever else, because talking about those things is really helpful for all of those that are passively listening, as well as for me. I like learning new things too. I guess I'm technically not a sysadmin only anymore. My title includes IT manager. I also do cloud stuff, DevOps stuff, something all in there. I work for a small company, so I wear many hats. I get to do lots of different things on any given day, which is a lot of fun. I enjoy the variety, but mostly I spend my time in PowerShell, whether I'm doing systems administration or cloud stuff or whatever else. I try and revolve it around PowerShell and automating it. I love automation. I love making things run faster. I love making it so that I don't have to do the work manually. I love getting to just play in anything that uses PowerShell for work or for personal, really. Um, and with this presentation, it's not just a tech demo. I also hope that you'll have ideas about things that you can build, things that you can do from what I talk about. And when that happens, make sure you write it down, think about it, and come back to it and do something, because that's the really good stuff. It's not just you can go and read the README on my module and you'll be good to go, but being able to talk about those things or get those ideas, that inspiration, that spark, is really valuable. So make sure you pay attention to that. Also, because I come from the sysadmin background, my focus with this module, TrackGpo, is around helping make the sysadmin's life easier. Most of what I talk about will just be focused on that sort of an area, but I'll also branch it out, and especially as you break in and say, hey, let's talk about this, or how could I use it here? Happy to explore that a little bit further. So let's dive into TrackGpo. I'm going to try and do this all from a remote shell, hopping onto a domain controller that's on my local network. As much as possible, I try not to remote desktop onto any domain controllers. I hope you do that as little as possible too. Using PowerShell and automation is definitely the way to go for most anything. So trying to do things in remote terminals, remote sessions is great. RDP onto DC string, nice. Okay, so first up is installing the module TrackGpo. Actually, you know what? First up is getting on the machine. I need to do that real quick. On here, don't mind me, got a little password. It's definitely not password 1. And let's see if we connect here. Is everyone able to see that text fine? Anyone having issues, raise your hand if you are. Feel free to yell at Phil or me about it.
I think it looks good.
Cool. Okay, so we are on, and I just need to add a couple little things for presentation mode purposes. Okay, we're good to go here. So the module is TrackGpo, real simple. I'm just going to put it into current user. This is a pretty basic thing. I hope everyone knows how to install a module. If you don't, I'm happy to walk through it more on what I'm doing with the scope. Just raise your hand if so. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of move along here. Oh, I didn't remove it. Okay. Looks like I need to update it real quick, though. Let's make sure that works. Glenn, I'm happy to hear that you're happy about my font size. Okay, now I've got the latest one here. If you go and install a new module, do you know how to see what commands are available in it? Raise your hand if you don't. How about that? Click on raise hand if you don't know how to find out what commands are in a module. Okay, I've got one person at least, maybe two, maybe three. I think it's just great to always be talking about how we can use the shell and how we can access all this information that we want. So I'm going to focus on using the PowerShell window. And we're going to say if I want to get the command from a module, I specify that I want to look up commands from the module. Great job, Alan Kaplan. You're right on the money. Get command, module, TrackGpo. You're good to go. In this case, TrackGpo only has one command, and it basically does one thing, hopefully decently well. We'll see about that. And that command is Invoke Gpo Tracking. If you want to learn about how Invoke Gpo Tracking can be used, do you know what command you would run for that? Raise your hand if you don't know, or does everyone still have their hand raised? Everyone knows? Oh, we got at least a couple people that maybe don't. All right. Get help. We know the command name. We just need to get information about it. Oh, I hit the wrong button. There we go. In the case of GPO tracking, there's a bunch of information in this description. If I was not in a remote shell, I could say, show me a window. But because I am remoted onto this domain controller, if I try and do anything like out grid view or show window, it's just going to say, hey, I can't do that, Dave. Sorry. In the case of this, we'll just get to look through it here. It's decently simple to use this module, I hope. The goal for me in making it was to make it something easy, something that you can take from start to finish pretty quickly. And so I've assumed a lot of things with the defaults where I just say, you know, this seems like a pretty reasonable way to go for most people, but then try and give you some power if you have advanced other options that you want to do with it. So let's see here. Where am I in my outline? For me, I actually started writing this script back in 2018 and started using it as a little way to make my auditors happy. I work for a bank, and we have auditors that are always coming and asking about how we can audit, how we can make sure that things are in a consistent state. And they would say, how do you have your password policy configured? When was it last changed? Show it to me in your group policy, stuff like that. And I kind of said, there has to be a decent way for me to say, here's last time that I changed to the password policy in the group policy. And I also want to be able to say what changed from last time to what it currently is. So I started writing this script as a way of tracking these changes, kind of taking snapshots and showing the diff between each of them. I also wanted the option to easily see the differences between group policies so that I can go and revert when I needed to, or if someone inadvertently deleted a group policy, being able to get it back pretty easily without having to dig through a whole bunch of backup folders and whatever else. So let's start with this right here. I'm just sitting in my documents folder, and I'm going to invoke GPO tracking to start tracking our group policy. It has two main things that you have to put in here. And you can see that everything else has these brackets showing that these are optional parameters. I think that this counts as optional. Actually, I should change that. Someone put in a issue for me and I'll get that changed. But that's what we'll start out with here. If I just want to create a new setup and track group policies into a folder called GPO store, I also need a working directory that will allow the temporary stuff to work. I created it this way so that anyone who has secure or sensitive information in their group policies, they at least have a measure of control over it. I hope that you don't have any sensitive data in any of your group policies. We've seen time and time again with security stuff that group policy is not a good place to put passwords or other sensitive information. So please don't. If you do, get rid of it. Oh my goodness, I have all sorts of things installed on here that aren't supposed to be installed yet. Let me get rid of all of this. And that'll make it a lot better for us. Get rid of. Okay. Let's try this again. Installing TrackGpo. Lovely, it's there. We have it. Huh. It is keeping that. Why do I have a bunch of modules when I should have just uninstalled it? How about now? Now are we good? That's better. There we go. That's what I was hoping for the first time. So by default, and just to be sensitive to those who may have sensitive information in their group policy, it will not do anything if you just run it like this. Because, and Phil, can you read this? What do I need to do in order to get it to initialize?
Says you need to initialize.
Oh, thank you, Phil.
You need to set that
really
in that parameter.
I really appreciate you jumping in there and helping make that easy for us. I'm going to tell it to initialize then. And it just did something. How awesome was that? It created a couple folders, and now it is backing up GPO reports. It just did some things. Look at that. How fun. And we can see that it created a bunch of files, all sorts of different things. Let's look at that a little bit more here. If I go over into the machine and I look in that GPO store folder that I told it to point to, we can see that it just created a whole bunch of different folders. And you may say, oh, what is this? I don't understand. Well, on the machine itself, I've created 11 group policies just as kind of a sample of your domain, something like this. You can see that I've got the default domain controller, default domain, and then I created another 9 policies real quick. That lines up nicely here. We've got 1 folder per policy. When you back up a GPO, that commandlet creates a nice random GUID to put it into a folder so you don't have to worry about collisions. But within each one of them, it has a nice little XML file that has all the details. I also have it exporting an HTML summary of that single item. So if you want to, oops, wrong window. Let's hit the right window this time. So if you want to look at the summary of any of those group policies, it's all sitting there available within that stuff as well.
So just a quick question there. Like the question was like, you're exporting all that stuff. So you're exporting both the HTML report and the XML version of the report.
Exactly.
So my guessing, I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, or yourself, is that you're going to do the XML so that you can parse it, or you can do some work with it. Or
I don't work with the XML at all. That is strictly for when you need to manage and restore your backups.
Okay.
Because when we have a backup of something, group policy itself will only work from the XML files. So in order to go back to a previous version or to restore a deleted one, we need the XML. All of my comparison stuff just uses actually the HTML.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So now that we've initialized this GPO store, we have one state backed up of all the group policies. Let's make a change here and watch what happens if we run this again. So if I come over here and I say, let's edit one of these policies, and I don't think that it matters what we do. Control panel. Oh, online tips. Let's get rid of those, right? We want to change that in our group policy. Great. I've now made that change. The allow online tips setting is configured and it's set to disabled. No one is allowed to. And we're going to do the same thing over here that we wanted to do originally with, hey, get what we're doing and take a snapshot of the group policy and show me differences between it. So here on the domain controller, if I press any key, thank you. Now, because we've already initialized the setup, I don't need to run that again. I actually never need to run that again, which means that if something happens, if I fat finger it because I'm just randomly doing things, or if something happened where I ran it from a completely different folder, it's going to go back to giving me that error about being angry, not being initialized. So typically, you do the initialize for the first run, and then you never add it again, just to make sure that it's not having any unexpected there.
What would
So if you
happen
initialize
if you
now-
did run? What would happen
Yeah.
if you did run it with the initialize a second time?
It would override some of the controls that are in place. It would be extra helpful, unfortunately. So I would definitely recommend don't keep including it, because like I said, if you are in a different folder or if you fat finger something, it'll go, oh, okay, I need to initialize. It'll create folders and it'll just run along happily doing whatever you just told it to do.
Oh, there you go. Another feature request.
Feature request of what, Phil? Leave it in?
If you've set to initialize and there's stuff there, is to then do a what if, is to do a force you to.
You're welcome to submit it. I'll look it over. So I just ran that, and we can see that over here in the folder, now there's something new. All of these were created at 6:45. There's one new one listed here. And if we come back over to our manage backups and we look at the timestamps on it, we can see that there's another one for GPO1. So it really did take a backup of just that one, because all the other ones were the same. That's its goal, is not to flood you with backups, just to give you usable changes in your store. Now, in here, if we open it up and we look at the actual HTML itself, we can see that there now is this setting here. Actually, I don't even use the HTML for the comparison between the two. Who was it that said something about this? Greg Lyons. You said clever to use the HTML. What I found is the HTML sometimes gets a little crazy, and it was a challenge where these things, HTMLs aren't the same. If you generate it twice, they won't be the exact same necessarily. And I wanted to kind of distill it down into something that would be consistent, something that I could do a comparison off of. So I actually created a stripped down version of HTML, not of HTML, a stripped down version of the HTML file, and just put it into something like this. I know that's small. I'll make it bigger for you. This is basically the HTML, except turned into a plain text. So I just stripped all the HTML tags away and did a couple other little things here and there in order to make it be a decently consistent way of viewing all of the settings that exist within a single group policy object. So we can actually even see here, allow online tips shows as disabled. And the comparison between these summary plain text that's what I use in order to determine whether or not a group policy has really changed or not. Yeah, there.
So am I correct in assuming that the differences are just from that output report, that kind of like stripped down HTML?
Exactly.
So you're stripping out all the HTML to give you kind of like a sanitized, text file, and then you're doing your comparison based upon these two text files.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I just made another change to the group policy object, and we just go ahead and run the tracking again, and it'll do the same thing of comparing everything, looking for differences, and then it's going to go and update the Git repo here, which is just that GPO store, and update it with anything. So we can see over here that now there's another new file that I just created here. And if I come and look at my group policy management, if I need to manage my backups, I can see that again, there is a new object here for the new version of it. I don't know how much people have used manage backups, but if you haven't, it's a pretty handy little tool. You have the checkbox of only show the latest for each group policy object that is in here, or you can view all of them. Really fun little thing. So let's talk about the last part of the basic usage, which is adding external capabilities, because just having it stored in this repo is really cool, but I also wanted a way to easily search what differences happened when changes happen. So let's make another change. Let's do it to, well, let's just do it back here. Let's do the settings page. We'll make it disabled. So another change here, and then let's come back over to here. And I released a helper module that works with the external capabilities on this, and it's called TrackGpo Smtp. This is the TrackGpo command will go and search for anything that provides this certain command name, which I'll get to later in the presentation, and it will go and pass all the information about group policy changes, additions, deletions, and let it do whatever external stuff is needed with it before it continues on. So first, we'll install the module. I'm sorry, I gotta stop here for a second. I've got someone even cleverer. Oh, thank you, very nice, Greg. Alan, where is the remove HTML content function? I can show you that. Here, let's talk about it. In TrackGpo, in GitLab, it's just in my source functions. It's a private function, and this is called remove HTML content. Here's the repo. Thanks, Phil. So I stole it from
We're
Winston.
not seeing the code.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. But now, that decently legible.
Thank you.
Everyone can see that fine?
Yeah, I think that's better. Okay. But yeah, I think they can just look on their own machine.
Yeah, you can look on your own machine. So this is in the TrackGpo repository, in the source folder, in the private functions, and it's just called remove HTML content that I stole from Winston Facet. I don't know who that is. I just found a nice little HTML one. But I did have to make some changes to it, so it's not the exact same thing. I think mostly what I did was along the strings, being able to take a couple different types of strings, and then I think I rearranged some of the invisible content stuff to strip so that it worked better with group policy HTML exports. So there you go. Back to this. So I've installed this external helper module, and if we do the same thing of get command module SMTP, we're going to see that it has a couple external commands that are available. And the new TrackGpo ticket and error are the ones that get called from TrackGpo. The new TrackGpo SMTP config is something that you would do before you invoke the GPO tracking so that it knows how to reach out, how to get a hold of you for something. And I will showcase that here. First, we need to put in some email credentials, though. do that. I'll go steal some password here, paste it in, lovely. Much as possible, we work with credentials, makes it so we have secure strings available, preserved in memory. So the TrackGpo SMTP config is pretty simple. SMTP server, SMTP port, who's it from, who's it to, whether or not to use SSL, and if you need to provide a credential, something like that. If you've done anything with SMTP on-prem using like Microsoft IIS 6, you may or may not have credentials needed. You may just have a relay that's accessible on your domain. Same thing works here. You just don't need to put in the SSL. You don't need to put in the credential. So it's pretty flexible for anyone, hopefully. And when you create that, it gives you a nice little object here. You don't need to do anything. It's just showing you what it created. And you're done. You're ready to go back to tracking GPOs. So if you have an automated script where you're wanting to set this up after you've done the initialize the first time, on all your subsequent times, you would say, okay, new TrackGpo SMTP config, and then go ahead and start tracking your group policy objects. We'll let this
So
run.
in this fashion, the objective is, you then run this Invoke tracking over and over and over again. So like in a daily build kind of thing.
Exactly. For me, I have it running 3 times a day. I do just before the workday starts, in the middle of the workday, and just before the workday ends. I find that makes it easy for me to get notified of things before they can cause problems, as well as while they're still fresh on my mind. I don't even do most of the group policy stuff anymore. Some of my junior admins do that. So this is a good way for us to see what was actually changed. And if something pops out that, oh, hey, this shouldn't have been done or whatever, we can go and talk about it real quick.
More clever stuff.
So I can see over here in my email that I just got a brand new email saying a GPO has been changed in my domain. If I come and look at it, I can see exactly what happened. I can see what the group policy name is. I can see when it was last modified, and that's based on what Active Directory lists. I can see the summary of changes. So this actually shows the changes on that HTML report. I can see that it's gone from revision 2 to revision 3. And then down here at the bottom, I can see exactly what changed. Somebody added a settings page visibility, and they set it to disabled. That's exactly right. That's what I came here and did. Someone has their hand up. Phil? Is that for play or for question?
No, that's I'm liking more and more this thing.
Oh, okay.
I looked at the code, but now I'm like actually seeing it in action. I like it better.
Cool. I see. It's a mind blown, not a hand raise. Okay. Let's see here. Check. So let's move on to the next thing, and let's showcase adding some group policies. We're done with this. We add group policies all the time. Phil, what's a great name for a group policy? What should we name this?
Change the world.
Change the world. Love it. Thank you. We just added a group policy. Ta-da! And which one should we get rid of? Which one is not performing well and it has a bunch of cruft in it?
Domain controller.
Domain controller? Okay, we'll just get rid of that one. I think that actually might break my domain. You're really mean. Oh, it is unwilling. That's serious.
Oh.
I've never tried to delete the domain controller's policy, so it's good to know that that's protected at least. How about you pick another one?
Number 1.
Okay,
We don't like that.
Let's get rid of number 1. So this is pretty typical stuff. In the day-to-day world, you're adding group policies, you're deleting group policies. And we're just going to come along here, and we've got our automated script that runs new tracking GPO SMTP config, and then it runs, again, the same thing of Invoke Gpo Tracking. Uh-oh, something happened. What is that just happened? Oh, I'm in the way. Again. There we go. I'm too smart for my own good, or too dumb, one of those. Phil, are you able to understand with this message? This is honestly my first time actually testing this out with anyone. Is this message clear to you?
It means that you've made that you set up some kind of threshold to say, hey, how many changes you can make, and if otherwise, it says you have to reinitialize, I think, right? Or you need to reset something.
Perfect, thank you. So right now it's saying that it has a default configuration of no more than 10% of your Active Directory group policy store should be changing between each of these runs.
So
And
if you have someone do a remove asterisk, your product wouldn't record it.
exactly, it would just give you this, and it wouldn't do anything else at all.
Is that a good idea?
Well, that's a great question. I like that feature from the Google, Cloud Domain Sync. Is that what they call it these days? It has this sort of a same default where it won't process if it had a significant chunk change unexpectedly. In my experience, it's been really nice actually, because normally when I have something like this, when I have this error come up, it's because maybe sysvol wasn't syncing, or DFS with all the policies wasn't syncing, and a wave just came through or didn't come through, something along those lines. So it's just kind of a control that helps make sure that it doesn't go crazy and cause you extra work if it backs up with a bunch of different changes that you then have to undo.
But isn't there a difference in kind between changes to the content of a GPO and group policies being deleted?
For the
And this, by the way, this is what
no.
I do for a living.
I love it. Please.
Yeah.
Happy to have you expound on that a little bit more.
And have you considered using like a sync so this always runs in the background?
I would
I don't
leave
know
that
if you
up
want
to
to
the
sync on
person
your
using
main
it.
controllers, but you know.
I would absolutely leave that up to the sysadmin doing stuff with it. Anything else to add on that?
I think I like this because it, rather than being inundated with, oh my gosh, these are all the things that have been added or deleted, it's telling you, hey, we've got a threshold that's been exceeded for the additions or deletions, and you're not being trying to winnow out what those details are. The first thing you get is a bunch have been added or deleted, and you're
Right.
not having to process a list and scroll back up on the screen and hope things aren't flushed out of the message buffer.
Right.
So
I'm
in some
sorry, go
fashion, you could even, it's just a config, right? It, like I think I read part of it is you can increase that number to 100% and say you can change the entire thing if you wanted
Absolutely.
to. But at this point, like you can leave it down here, but then like right presently in the module, it doesn't tell you that it won't send an alert when this happens either. And so you could do some kind of funky thing. It's like, hey, still send me alert, still do this, but then process anyway. Or if it's over a threshold, send another event kind of thing. I don't know. I'm
Perfect. Thank you for bringing that up. So in this case, I actually just ran it 3 times here, and every time it gave me the same error. Too many added or removed group policies. And actually over here, because we have SMTP set up, I now have 3 emails saying, hey, there's an error. Guess what it says? Same thing here. I don't have any klaxon sound. Sorry, Chris. Greg Lyons, does this answer your question? Okay, perfect. Dan, your question was, why not use AGPM? At that time, we didn't have anything related to extra Microsoft services. And I think at that point, AGPM was a paid offering. I don't know if it still is or isn't. I also have seen people say that AGPM only works if people only use it, and that they can still get around and just hit the group policy themselves. I honestly don't know that much about it. This was bred out of a need for monitoring and making auditors happy, and I just used PowerShell because it was the easiest thing. Still is, makes sense. Choose your own adventure. Okay. We will also get to that, Chris, of shimming in your own klaxon sounds. David Stein says he just did an AGPM rollout and he agrees with me. I don't know what he's agreeing with, but cool. We will hopefully get to the diff class. AGPM is gross. Okay, let's move on here. How do we resolve this? Well, we can either figure out what's going on, why are there so many changes, or we can increase that number to make it work. In my experience, or at least for my company, 10% is great because if I'm running it 3 times a day, I never have an organic amount of change that hits 10% of our group policy objects within a 4-hour window. That's just what I picked, but hey, you're the sysadmin, you can pick whatever number you want. So over here, I'll just say, let's change the remove percent max delta up to 20%. And we'll let it go and run. It deletes some stuff, it creates some stuff. We should see over here, if we look, that it just made a nice little change. And then we should also be able to come over to the email and see some changes. That's our expectation, right? Ta-da! I just got 2 emails. The GPO has been removed from my domain. Hey, look, Phil, you picked this. You picked GPO1. It's gone. I know everything enough about it for me to go and find it if I need to. And I can also look at my new one. Here it is, change the world. It doesn't have all the details of the group policy in here. I kind of went back and forth on that. I just felt like when you're adding a group policy, just getting a capture of the first state and saying, yeah, you've got the thing is good enough, but then showing it from any time that you have the changes, being able to see here's what changed between it, seems to work pretty well. So that's just what I have. Can the person who made the change be added to the email notification? Right here, if I come to this with the SMTP config, no, by default. But because this is just calling an external, let me bring that up here, get a command from here. Because TrackGpo will go and call the new TrackGpo ticket external command, you can write your own function or your own module that does anything that you want to. It will get passed the information, and then you can say, okay, here's who to send it to. Unfortunately, because this is snapshots, it doesn't know who did it, unless there's some other way that I'm unaware of. But I would say that no, this does not know who did it. It only knows that something was done. Okay, no questions right now? Okay, no questions then.
Can you restore that policy from the backup?
Yes, I would be happy to. Thank you. Manage backups. I can see that GPO1 is sitting right here. I might want to just pick show me only the latest so that I'm not accidentally using the original GPO1. Maybe I want the latest one only. And I can see that that one is right here. I want to restore the backup. GPO1 succeeded. Close this. Lo and behold, GPO1 is back. Now we would expect that if I bring GPO1 back in, that next time the script runs, there would be some sort of a notification about it, right? That would be my hope, at least. We'll give my domain controller a second to wake up. I haven't talked to it in a minute. Come on. Remote sessions. And by default, I don't mess with that max delta because I'm happy with the 10%. I run my GPO tracking. Let's see if it picks it up. Hey, look, it found something. I committed it to the group policy repo store. And if I come back over to email, I see that a GPO has been added to the domain. Okay. Perry, I don't. Yeah, that seems right. David Stein, if you enable auditing, the event log will show who modified, but it might require event forwarding. Yeah, so you'd have to go and do something yourself where you go and pull from potential. Would it just be the primary domain controller that you'd have to do, or would you hit all domain controllers? Should just be able to do it off of one.
You have to do it from the one that it made the change to. So somebody wrote it somewhere, and then that one would report that.
So you'd hit all the domain controllers to see who had the event, unless you forwarded it over to somewhere else.
Well, yeah.
Then you could figure out who it was that did it.
Yeah, still not as elegant as what you've got here. There you go.
Greg, you're welcome to submit the feature request there for the ability to select an OU filtering. 4,200 GPOs. I cannot imagine dealing with that many. That is so cool. I love it. That sounds super awesome. I'm used to being in a one-man band sort of a deal. Let's see. Next thing. Okay. One of the biggest challenges for me in writing this was turning it into this consistent and useful format. So doing the HTML stuff and then doing the comparison on it. One of the other issues that I had was, where did I list that out? I might have gotten rid of that. It's been so long since I did this. I'm trying to remember what was one of the other issues that really stood out to me while I was working on this. Nope. Presentation brain freeze. Can't think of it. So let's move on unless there's any questions or thoughts, advice that someone has to give. Okay, we'll dig a little bit deeper. You've got a pretty good sense, I hope, of what it would take to get this up and running in your environment. Install the module, install the helper module if you like SMTP, and run it with initialize, and then just run it, however often you like. If you want to do once a day or 10 times a day, it really shouldn't matter too much. But it does have a lot of extra features, so I'll start diving into those here. The first one that I will show is the ability to customize the information that you get within the notification of changes. So we have this little switch parameter here called skip common changes. And what that'll do is over here, where normally we have like the revision change information, it's something that people don't really care about, or at least I don't always care about seeing. So this will just remove that extra little bit of common information off of there. And then the other option you have that's related to it is the GPO Change Context, which is how much information about or how much information around this change is displayed. By default, it will show 3 lines above and 3 lines below. And we can see the same thing down here with the actual change that I made. 3 lines above and 3 lines below while it hits the end. With the GPO Change Context option, I can set that to be as little as I want, or I can set it to be really big. Let me showcase that here with a 0. I got to go make another change. So let's edit this change the world policy. And we'll just something else. Let's try printers this time. Activate internet printing. That seems really good. Let's activate internet printing. Okay, so that's now active in my domain. And I've got skip common changes and GPO change context added. And I'll just go ahead and let that run. And we'll see the same thing, hopefully, come through of it did detect something. And then if I come over to my email and look, there's been a GPO change. Awesome. And I can see here are the details of what happened. It previously had no settings defined. Now it has policies, and here's all the information. And if you're familiar with looking at these HTML exports, then this will be very familiar to you. If you're not, let me just bring this one up. This is over here of computer configuration policies, administrative templates, printers, activate internet printing. Internet print, everyone gets a print job. Thank you, Phil. So very, very similar between what you see in the email and what the actual change looks like in this HTML report. Because I set the GPO context option to 0, there's no additional context above or below. If I set that to a really large number, I could see a lot of information all around this area in that policy. Print nightmares. Yep. Okay. Another thing to add is that this is a regular Git repo that we're working on. If I just look at, if I go into it, actually, let's go into that. GPO store. I can look at each of the times that it makes any change, just like I can with any other Git repo, and see exactly what was happening. Add this, remove this, change this. I can manipulate it if I need to, reset going forward or backward with the current working directory on it. So if you have experience working with Git, then this will feel very normal to you. If you don't, you typically don't need to touch it, which is the kind of the nice thing too, because it just adds data to the Git repo and it's there for you whenever you need it. We can even look at the status. It also shows a couple other things that are listed here. These are untracked files because we previously were tracking them, but no longer are. So this is stuff that gets deleted. We had a bunch of different versions of the GPO1, and then we deleted GPO1, and we told it we no longer want any of these showing up here within the Git repo. That doesn't change anything if you're just looking at this file view, but there are some intricacies where that is nice. But you also don't have to worry about those being lost because it's a Git repo. Those are within the repo itself, so you can always go and restore to those points and pull them out if you need to pick off those commits. Not seeing any new questions in chat. Okay, we'll keep going then. Because this is a regular Git repo, you could add on to it and say, you know what? After I run this every time, I'm going to go ahead and run a Git push. Obviously, I just created a repo. I didn't set up anything, so it doesn't have anywhere to push to. But if you needed to have all of your group policies get backed up to, say, your enterprise Git client on-prem or even a cloud provider, you absolutely could just say, open up my terminal, create the SMTP config, run the GPO tracking, and then do a Git push and push any changes up to the upstream Git repo. Really, really easy to do. And let's do another one. If I don't want a Git repo, some people, they don't want to have the extra complexity of having a Git repo. You can absolutely do that in your GPO tracking. You can just say, you know what, disable that Git repo entirely. Let's actually do this on a different folder. A GPO without Git, how about that? So I want to disable the Git repo. I want to get a snapshot of everything. What we expect is that it'll get mad at you saying, this is not a thing you need to initialize. Haha, everything you'd want, right? This is a different folder name. It doesn't already exist. You need to initialize. Okay, I'm gonna run this again with the initialize just this first time to get it created. If I look closely, I'll notice I actually did it here in the documents. I probably shouldn't have. I should have done that upset out of here. If I was looking closer, I would have realized that. Let's do it again. Initialize outside of there. That's better. So if I come over to the GPO without Git, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just now a bunch of folders without any sort of Git capabilities or tracking to deal with. No questions there, okay. And just like you'd expect, when I had the error, it said, hey, this doesn't exist. You just tried to create to a folder that doesn't exist and you didn't specify initialize. I got an email letting me know all about it. Then, oh, one other scenario that you could do if, say, you wanted to just have a snapshot, but then you wanted to use your internal backup agent to deal with getting it to a cloud or something else, you could say, I would just want an exact mirror of what my group policy stuff looks like sitting in this folder. Git is a dependency 100% of the time, Alan, because it relies on git diff in order to compare the information between the things. So you always have to have git in order to use this module. Thank you for calling that out. So, come on, domain controller, you can do it. There we go. So if I wanted to just have an exact mirror of my group policies to a folder, I could say that I want to remove old policy versions, because right now it's not deleting the old version if you update it. And I also can say remove deleted policies. I've got git disabled. This should turn it into an exact mirror of my existing, what is that, 10 policies or so that I have here. I guess 11 policies. 9, 10, 11, 12. Counting is hard. So let's run this. See what happens. Did it delete stuff? It's got 12. That's exactly what we wanted. Now, if I go and change something, we would expect it to still be sitting at 12. I'm sorry, this did not follow me nicely. Over here. There we go. Now you can see. Love it. Let's show verbose on this next one, Alan. So if I make a change to something, I'll come back to change the world. And maybe it's happened that internet printing hasn't worked out so well. We want to disable internet printing. Okay, internet printing is disabled. And I'm going to add the verbose option here. You'll get to see exactly what it does. Hopefully this all fits on screen. Oh, I'm in the way. That's okay. There we go. So right here, you can see all the different things that it's doing. Remove items, comparing group policy, found 12 items, comparing 12 items. It is comparing the GUIDs, reconciling changes. It found right here, removing the previous version of this, which shows me exactly what was deleted if I ever need to go and use it. And then all the other ones it didn't do anything with. And if I come back over to the Explorer to look at it, I can see that there are still 12 folders exactly in here. So it is a perfect one-to-one mirror of what is in my group policy sitting in this folder. And if someone's going to ask about email, yep, we got the email right here as well saying, hey, look, something changed. We take a look at it and we can see it was the change the world policy that changed. We can see exactly when it was modified at according to Active Directory. And we can see that activate internet printing was removed of enabled, and we've added it set to disabled. Okay, any questions while I take a drink for a sec?
No, I think everybody's just highly impressed with what this has come up with, and I think this is really cool.
Would git compare or git diff have any advantages or disadvantages over the comparison that you're currently doing?
So I use git diff. I can happily dive into that in just a few minutes and show you how it does that. But yeah, it absolutely uses a git diff. Well, let's just do it right now. I'm waiting, right?
I thought I saw PowerShell code doing the diff.
Is it the diff class that does it? Let's see here. No, it's not the diff class. I think that it is in the main function. Here it is. I found it. Hopefully that's still readable for everyone. So this just uses a regular git diff, and I have it removing a bunch of extra information just to give me the exact level that I wanted. So it's got some stats in it. It doesn't include information about the index. And I don't remember all these switches. I have to look it up every time I do it. Let's see. Greg, feature request 2, add a text file with the human readable name in the subfolder. So you mean something different than the existing summary? Because this is listed as a .summary file instead of a .text file. Is that all you're saying? So you would just love for it to be .text instead of .summary. Okay, submit a feature request. We'll think about it. Did you have questions still on the git diff here? I'll assume no, because I don't hear anything. So we've talked about some of the extra capabilities. Now let's talk about extending the capabilities with writing your own functions for handling changes or errors. I actually created another module that just kind of showcases it, but it's easier if I just put it here into the console host, I feel like. This is it. When GPO tracking runs, it will look for a command called new TrackGpo ticket external. If it finds one, it will run it and it'll send over 4 parameters, always at least 2, the type and the GPO info. And then if it's a change, it'll also include the diff and some stats about it. So you can come in here and you can put anything that you want to into your function of what you want to do. And you can also put in information. Anything that this function returns to TrackGpo will get saved as the commit message in the Git repo itself. So if you want to put in your own custom that, you know, add or remove or change GPO event, something like that, that's going to now be the Git commit messages. For the moment, we'll just change it to be like this. So instead of sending me emails, now I'm just going to have it spit out the GPO info. That's all I'm asking it to do. And if we run this same thing of doing the one-to-one mirror, and if I go and delete any one of these folders, the GPO without Git, it should be like, oh, hey, there's something missing I need to add. So let's run it, see what happens. Ta-da, it spit out GPO info. Apparently the one that I deleted was GPO 9, and I know that this is the time that it was created, the time that it's modified, it's good, blah, blah, blah. So you can create your own function, and you can do this for both the TrackGpo ticket external as well as the TrackGpo, what do we call it, error external. Yeah, so TrackGpo error external. And you can also see that because I created my own function for the ticket, it's now going to not do the email. If I come and look at my email, there's not any new email after running that. So I will only get emailed if there's an error. If there's no errors and it's just adding, removing, changing group policy objects, then it'll run whatever custom code that I put in.
So effectively, you're just overloading the actual function itself. And
you're just overloading it. And that's because I'm not calling it by the fully qualified module name. I'm just saying, hey, get a command called new TrackGpo ticket external. If there is one, go ahead and run it with those 4 parameters. Alan says, can this be installed on and run from a domain server, not a domain controller? Absolutely. I actually have this running on a member server, not on a domain controller. I don't run anything on my domain controllers. Just here in my home lab, I only have a domain controller that I spun up for this, and so it just sits by itself. So as long as it has the capability to run backup GPO and get GPO, and those are both just part of the RSAT tooling. So as long as you have the RSAT module for GPO stuff, then you can run it on any machine. Yep. Okay. Let me think here. I think that is everything that I have. Any other questions that people have or things you want to explore here?
Yeah, Kevin, I want to know what the press any key space to preserve is.
So that's just my my little presentation function that I had. I was trying to keep it so the stuff was up at the top and I didn't have to hit clear every 5 seconds. That's
Do you
all.
have a minute to look at that diff function?
Yes.
I was not familiar with the queue part of the generic collections. How you did that?
Oh, okay. So the diff class that I have.
Right.
Okay, let's see here.
And not. I have two questions. One is a walkthrough of the .NET stuff, which I'm not familiar with, but more importantly, why are you doing it, and what do we gain by using it?
So this is just creating a set.
We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for that.
Sure.
How about now?
Yes, thank you.
So in this diff class, a diff has multiple hunks within it. And in order to be able to properly, what was it? I think being able to properly work on removing the common stuff like the user revision or computer revision stuff, I wanted to work on those instead of just as a big string or a big array of strings. I wanted to work on it as more of a native data type. So I just created a queue generic class, which is something that I can just add to, put things into the queue. So I take the entire diff going into it and create that queue, and then I pull out from it one line at a time, and I parse out what it is. So I'm going to first be looking for the header stuff and pulling that out until I get to the first part. And I think that it's easiest to visualize it here. So I just take the whole diff here, and that's what goes into that generic collections queue item. And then I remove all the headers, so you don't even see those on the final output here. But then on this hunk, it's got its information about it and then all of its details. So I just create all those hunks and I put them in with that diff class so that I can manipulate it a little bit easier. And then you also do have the option to specify things that you don't want to have included in your diff. So if you're writing your own function for running this and you say, hey, get me a diff that has something removed, you can add it that way.
And that would just be regex for the hunk pattern?
Yes. So you can see that in here that it does.
So the DQ method is writing out whatever, because it looks like you split it into an array, right?
Yeah, so it comes in an array. I just take the diff as an array and I create the queue, and then I read it from the top down one line at a time using the queue.
And that's what peek is with that method?
Yeah, so peek is look at the first one. DQ is take the first one off of that stack so that now next time I run the queue.dq,
you're in the next one. It's like a record set. You're just traversing the list. Okay, thank you. I had not seen that before.
There are a lot of fun things in the generic collections. You've got a queue, you've got a stack, you've got a list. I've
used list all the time, but I wasn't familiar with.
Look at some of those other things in that generic collection. It's really fun being able to do that more classical programming related stuff. I'm not a programmer. I tried going into computer science and it was not for me. My brain is just not abstract enough to handle that. But the PowerShell capabilities are right around perfect for me. I can understand what PowerShell does.
I'm not a CS guy, but yeah, I just wrote this module that's using all these queues. Yeah.
At least
I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. It's all good.
David Stein, SMTP module. Are you looking at an alternative for send mail message? Yeah, I haven't really given it too much thought because you have the capability of writing your own modules. You can publish your own module that does something better than SMTP than send mail message, and that'll happily work with this code just fine. All you need to be able to do is take those 4 parameters that are listed, just like what I was showing with the function here, As long as you can take in those 4 type GPO info, diff, and stats, then you can do whatever you want. You don't have to rely on that send mail message.
I know, but I don't want to.
Exactly. So you can write your own function that doesn't.
The graph option is kind of icky.
I mean, I don't have any experience with Microsoft Graph yet, but I'm sure that I will at some point in the future.
No, this is cool.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Did people have, was this fun? Did you learn something? Did it give you thoughts on things you can do in your environments?
Well, I'll certainly be playing with it, more. I downloaded it before, but now I'm actually gonna, truly use it, because I looked at the code first. I'm like, I kind of see what you're doing, but I'm not sure what you're doing. And now that I've seen it in action, I'm like, okay, I understand better. So This is a
Awesome.
great presentation.
Make sure you update to the latest. I squashed a lot of bugs today.
Oh, okay. All right. Snap again.
Okay, Phil, I've used my hours. I think it's back to you.
Oh, this is so again, thanks everybody for joining us. And Devin, I think you definitely hit it out of the park. There's some you've gotten a lot of great feedback in chat, and you've been doing a great job responding to feedback, and I certainly think a lot of people are highly impressed with what you've come up with, and did a great job, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. And then for the YouTube crowd, thanks for joining us. And, we will continue to post more videos, and join us again. We are at rtpsug.com, and you can join us on at a meeting. We meet the first and third Wednesday of every month. And see you soon. Thanks so much.